wake up. No more distractions, no more co-host review shows, just narrating slasher books for slashaholics. I'm done with those damn review shows, done with being someone's co-host. I'm just narrating slasher books for the slashaholics. And when Jason walks in with his machete, or when you cross paths with Myers, or you dream of Freddy, whatever the tale, I'm gonna read it for you, cause I'm the 80s fucking slasher librarian Josh LaRue. Whatever I read, whatever you hear, there's one thing I'll promise year after year: you're gonna get the best of my best, this I promise you, cause I'm back in that fucking bloody slasher groove. Because the librarian is back in the slasher groove. The librarian is back in that slasher groove. That's a promise from Josh LaRue. Slasher books both old and new, written by me and written by you. Yup, now I'm back, I'm back. No more distractions, no more co-host reviews. The librarian is back in that slasher groove, just narrating slasher books for slashaholics. The librarian is back. I even wrote my own take on Jason and Freddy. Started with quarantine and then I was ready, so I sent Krueger to space in celestial slumber. Then Jason went primal and the rafters had his number. My audiobooks have crossed 75. Now let's hit 100 and have a fucking good time. The librarian is back in the slasher groove. The librarian is back in that slasher groove. Just narrating slasher books for slashaholics. The librarian is back. Even wrote my own take on Jason and Freddy. Started with quarantine and then I was ready, so I sent Krueger to space in celestial slumber. Then Jason went primal and the raptors had his number. My audiobooks have crossed 75. Now let's hit 100 and have a fucking good time. The librarian is back.
A Nightmare on Elm Street 6, Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. The fan novelization by Jeremy Terry. Chapter 20. Family Reunion. Maggie leaned back in the chair behind Doc's desk, trying to calm her thrumming nerves as Doc secured electrodes to her temples. Immediately, a monitor began to beep in a steady cadence beside her as her brainwaves were transmitted from the electrodes along wires that now connected her to the machine. She watched the small screen where a thin green line began to rise and fall. Finished with his task, Doc knelt down in front of her with the piece of Freddy's sweater clutched in his hands. "We can't get him in the dream," Doc said, "but if this can come out, he can come out. And once he's out..." He flexed his muscles, tearing the scrap of cloth in two. "He's real. And if he's real, he can bleed." "And die," Tracy added from where she stood, near the office door. She began to pace, chewing on her already short fingernails. "Right," Doc nodded. "The bastard may be forever in his world, but we will own his ass in ours." "How will you know I have him?" Maggie asked. Doc patted the beeping monitor. "This'll tell me when you found him. Then I'll bring him out, and you out. You have to be holding on to him to carry him out." "I know," Maggie said, her determination evident on her face. Doc stood, his knees popping. "He's gonna try to trick you just like with Tracy. You have to be ready for that." He reached for the novelty 3D glasses sitting on the corner of his desk and handed them to Maggie. "Use these to see around him." Maggie took the glasses, uncertain whether or not Doc was playing a joke on her. "Are you for real?" "They mean nothing here, but inside the dream they can be anything you want them to be," he said. "He'll use your eyes to fool you, so use these to see beyond his bullshit. He got inside your head, now get inside his." Maggie smiled ruefully. "That's my job, right? Getting into people's heads, their brains?" Tracy stopped pacing, walked over and took Maggie's hand in her own. Maggie smiled up at the teenage girl, pleased at the uncharacteristic display of affection. "Be careful," Tracy said. "He's good at finding out where it hurts the most. You gotta let me go with you." Maggie gave Tracy's hand a gentle squeeze. "You can't. I'm sorry. It has to be me and him. You just be ready when I bring him out." Tracy frowned but nodded. She knew there was no point in arguing. Maggie turned her attention back to Doc. "Okay, I'm ready. Put me under." "Okay," he said. "Try to relax. Focus on the green line on the monitor. Listen to the steady beep. Breathe deep. It's hypnotic, isn't it? Go with it. Hear the beep. Hear the sound of my voice. You're getting sleepy. See the line? See how it changes? It's your path to where he is. I'm going to count to 10. When I reach 10, you will be fully asleep. 1, 2, 3. Maggie's eyes felt heavy, her vision blurred. It was hard to keep focusing on the line. She closed them and found that she could still see the green line like a path through a dark forest inside her mind. She started walking down the path between the trees. 4, 5, 6, 7. Her breathing deepened, her heart slowed, her eyes began to flick back and forth behind their lids. She saw a light ahead. 8, 9, 10. She passed into the light. And opened her eyes on Doc's office. She sat up sighing. For a moment she thought that it hadn't worked. Then she realized that Doc and Tracy were gone. She was alone in the office. She reached up and found that the electrodes were gone as well. She stood and looked around. Everything looked the same, and yet... She lifted the cheap-looking 3D glasses and studied them. "All right, Mags," she said. "It's time to see beyond his bullshit." She donned the glasses. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The world was tinted red and blue. Then the colors faded in a flash of white light. She reached up for the glasses and found they had vanished. She looked around her and gasped. Everything seemed sharper, more real than reality, as if the whole world around her had been printed in high definition. She felt something, like a frigid draft on the exposed skin at the base of her skull, and turned towards the painting of the dream demons hanging on the wall. The 3 worm creatures were moving. They writhed over the stone gate like snakes hissing sibilantly as they eyed her. A small light gleamed in the center of the portal. She knew what she needed to do. "Get into his brain," she said as she walked up to the painting and gripped the frame. She wasn't surprised when her thumb sank into the picture. It was no longer a painting, it was a window. She lifted herself up and crawled through into the dark space inside. She looked around and saw only an endless expanse of midnight black in every direction. The only thing that seemed to exist in the universe was the gate and its guardians. She steeled herself and approached the gate. Each of the worms turned their human faces towards her, followed her with cold black eyes as she approached. She half expected them to try to bar her way, but they only observed as she passed through the arch into the blooming light beyond. She felt herself yanked forward into the blinding light at an incredible speed. The light filled her, became her. After a moment it faded and she found herself standing in a strange hallway with doors on either side. The floor was white tile, the walls a pistachio green, giving the passage the look of a hospital corridor that had fallen into disrepair. Electrical conduits and exposed wires crisscrossed along the ceiling and hung down like thick spiderwebs. Bright blue streaks of electricity crackled along the cables and sent orange sparks raining down. She stepped towards the closest door, reached for the handle, and yanked her hand back just in time as electricity arced down from the cables and struck the metal door. She moved to the next one, and the same thing happened. Somewhere off in the distance, she thought she heard a gasp of surprise and anger. Freddy was so caught up in his brooding as he sat amongst the pipes and boilers of his refuge that he hadn't noticed the thin stream of light appear from thin air and pass through the back of his head. That changed the moment Maggie touched the first door. Pain, real pain, filled his head and he clutched his temples with both hands. He could feel her inside. His Catherine. This wasn't the way it was supposed to be. He was supposed to be inside her mind. She tried another door, causing his synapses to fire, and he screamed in pain. He stood up, knocking the old wooden chair he was sitting on to the floor. "Get out of my head!" he screamed. Lightning filled the corridor, blocking her way forward. Maggie looked around for any clue on how to proceed and saw an electrical fuse box on the wall beside the last door on the right. The fuse box cover was missing and the shoddy wiring was exposed. Maybe she could short out the box? Would that kill the electricity blocking her way? How could she do it? She ran her hands over her body, paused when she felt the belt cinched around her waist. She pulled it off and examined the metal buckle. It might work. She gripped the belt's leather strap and swung it back and forth in a growing arc. She took careful aim and made her throw. The belt buckle struck true, sending a great shower of sparks flying. Smoke filled the corridor with the scent of burning ozone. She coughed, waved her hand over her face to clear the worst of the smoke, and ran for the door before the electricity could return. She grabbed the handle, turned it, and ran through into a void. Light bloomed, and she found herself standing in the back of an elementary school classroom. The teacher was nowhere in sight, and a group of children sat in their desk watching a small blond boy dressed in a brown and tan sweater. Maggie glanced past him to the chalkboard, where someone had written, "I will not torture small animals," over and over again. She looked back to the boy who was opening a small cage and pulling out a brown and white gerbil. He placed the animal on the desk nearest him and then hefted a hammer. He brought it down once, twice, a third time, a huge grin spreading across his young face. "Jesus," she thought, "I'm in Freddy's memories." As one, the other children stood and surrounded the young Kruger kid and began to chant, "Son of 100 maniacs, son of 100 maniacs." Their taunts didn't seem to register with the young boy. Little Freddy just kept pounding away at the dead gerbil until it was nothing more than a wet pile of mush. Finally, one of the kids, tired of being ignored, grabbed Freddy's arm. Freddy froze for a second and then spun around and clamped his teeth down on the unfortunate child's nose. The kid screamed and beat at Freddy's head, but it did no good. Freddy shook his head like a dog shaking a toy, and blood began to flow. "Oh, God!" Maggie moaned, backing away from the sight. She backed through the classroom doorway, out into the echoing hallway. There was another flash, and the scene changed. She looked around, recognizing where she was. It was the basement of the Elm Street home. Gone were the dust and cobwebs. Tools hung from pegs on the walls. Well used but clean. The floor was freshly swept. It was obvious to Maggie that the basement belonged to someone with exacting expectations. A titter of laughter to her right. Maggie looked and saw Freddy, now a teenager, standing in one corner of the basement with his shirt pulled up to reveal his flat stomach. Thin pink and white lines crisscrossed his abdomen and ribs, evidence of healing wounds. He held a straight razor in his right hand, pressed it to his skin. Giggling, he pulled the blade across his stomach, opening a small red slit that dribbled blood. It beaded into fat crimson diamonds that rolled down to soak into Freddy's waistband. Someone was coming down the stairs. Freddy paused mid-cut and turned to see a scruffy middle-aged man with long black hair and 3 days' growth of beard on his sallow cheeks. This was Freddy's stepfather and the keeper of the pristine workshop and its tools. Apparently, his fastidiousness didn't extend to his personal hygiene. He stumbled down the stairs, a leather belt looped around one hand. Maggie took a breath and nearly gagged at the thick clouds of alcohol that surrounded him. "You've been a waste ever since I took you in, boy," the man rasped, snapping the belt against the stair railing menacingly. "Now it's time to take your medicine." Freddy just stood there with a grin on his face as the strap came down and slapped over his shoulders. Smack! The grin grew wider. Smack! He howled with laughter. Smack! Smack! The man's face grew red, his eyes wide. He hit Freddy harder and harder. The leather belt thrummed through the air. "Thank you, sir," Freddy said. "May I have another?" Muscles bunched up in the man's shoulders and arms, the cords standing out beneath his flesh. He lifted the belt and swung it with all of his might. Freddy stepped into the swing and caught his stepfather's wrist, stopping the swing cold. The man tried to pull free, but the crazed teen was too powerful for him. Freddy pulled the man closer until they stood eye to eye. Fear spread over the man, causing him to quake in his boots. The acrid scent of Freddy's madness wafted off of him in waves. "Do you want to know the secret of pain?" Freddy asked. "If you stop feeling it, you can start using it." He lashed out with the straight razor and sliced a deep gash from the crook of the man's elbow to his wrist, cutting a faded tattoo of a heart on his wrist in half. Dark blood flowed up. To Maggie, it looked almost like black oil rising from a fissure in the ground. Freddy released the man and staggered back, falling on the ground at the base of the stairs. He tried to crawl away, but Freddy didn't give him the chance. He was on his stepfather in a second, grabbing the man by his hair on the back of his head. He yanked his head back, raised the blade over the man's face. "No, stop!" Maggie yelled. Freddy swung the straight razor at his stepfather's eyes. Flash! The Elm Street house basement was gone, to be replaced by the clanking, hissing boiler room. A dim light shone through a door that was open just a crack. Maggie approached it slowly, wary of what new horrors she might see on the other side. She put her hand on it, felt the rough wood beneath her fingertips, and pushed. There was a small room on the other side, lit by a single bulb that dangled from the ceiling by an exposed wire that had been mended in several places with black electrical tape. Newspaper clippings from the Springwood Gazette were taped to the brick walls above a box, spring, and mattress. Someone lay on the bed, his familiar head of blonde hair visible above the threadbare quilt covering him. Raised voices drew her attention to a small window set high up one wall, and Maggie turned to see shadowy figures crouching outside. "He's in there," said a woman's husky voice from outside. "Give me the lighter. The court should have taken care of him. Now it's up to us." Maggie saw a flicker of orange light, and then the window was shattered by a Molotov cocktail made from a gasoline-filled beer bottle and a flaming piece of torn t-shirt. It tumbled end over end and shattered on the wall over the sleeping man. Bright, burning death rained down on him, and Freddy came awake with a scream of pain. Maggie saw that he was dressed in the red and green sweater and brown slacks that he'd worn in her nightmares. He'd beat at the fire that had taken root in his clothing and his hair, but it was already too late. The fuel burned too hot, and the fire was hungry for more. Suddenly, the crackle of the flames and Freddy's screams faded to silence, and both he and Maggie stared at three twisting shapes that materialized from the black smoke near the ceiling. Maggie gasped when she realized it was the three dream demons from Doc Cotto's painting. The worm-like creatures weaved through the air around Freddy, each speaking to him in unison. "We know what you want," they said, their voices an ancient sibilant hiss. Freddy glanced past them to the broken window where the parents of his victims milled about, waiting and watching as he burned. He looked back at them, his eyes alight with the hate-filled fire of hell. "I want to make them pay!" Freddy shouted. "I want to take all their children from them just like they took my child from me! I want to kill every last one until the people of this shitty town are broken and curse the day they were born." The worms chuckled, pleased. "Then open up to us, let us in, and you will be forever." Freddy threw his arms wide, and the worms flew into his chest. There was a blinding flash of light, and Maggie opened her eyes on the hallway with its exposed wires and chipped tiles. She looked around and saw that all the doors with the exception of one was open. One last memory, she thought. She moved towards it and heard the hum of the electricity turning back on. She saw the wires leading towards the door, knew what Freddy was about to do. "What is behind the last door? What don't you want me to see?" She sprinted forward before the electricity could reach the door and bar her way, and slammed it open. She ran through into a golden beam of afternoon sunlight that lit the water tower like a beacon. Thunk, thunk. She was in her childhood backyard once again. She turned towards the sound and saw her childhood self standing on top of the cellar stairs, staring as her father bashed her mother's brains out on the ground. Loretta Kruger's face was purple, her eyes a web of broken capillaries. Maggie could tell right away that she was dead. Her father realized that he was being watched and dropped Loretta to the grass. He turned to his daughter, held out his hands to her. "It's all right, Catherine. Come here." The little girl shook her head as tears streamed down her face. Freddy took a step towards her, his eyes pleading for her to understand. "Don't cry, baby. Your mommy had to take her medicine for snooping into Daddy's special work. But you won't tell, will you?" The little girl shook her head, her pigtails swinging around her head. "I won't tell." "But you did tell, didn't you?" Maggie turned. The yard was gone and the nightmare boiler room was back. The burned haunter of dreams stood twiddling his finger knives 5 feet away from her. "Now," he said, "it's time to take your medicine." He took a step towards her, the bladed glove ready at his side. "You killed my mother," she said, grabbing a metal pipe from the floor and stepping forward to meet him. She swung the pipe at his face, hitting him a solid blow that tore his cheek open. He howled with laughter, as if having great bodily harm inflicted on him was the funnest thing he'd ever seen. Maggie felt her gorge rising when she saw his filthy teeth working through the wound to his face. "Get it together, girl," she thought. "It's now or never." She lunged forward and wrapped her arms around his waist. Freddy's laughter tapered off as he glanced down with dawning realization. The image of Nancy Thompson filled his mind. He'd been through this before. "Oh, no, you don't!" he growled. "You aren't getting me!" He lifted the glove over his head, poised to strike. The monitor in Doc Cotto's office was a cacophony of beeps, the thin green line rising and falling in jagged peaks. Tracy looked over her shoulder at Doc, sitting tensely at the sleeping Maggie's side. Maggie was restless, her eyes rolling wildly behind her closed eyes, strangled moans escaping her lips. "She's got him!" Tracy shouted. "Get her out!" The glove came down and passed right through Maggie's body like it was made of smoke. Freddy looked at his hand, at his daughter, and saw that they both were fading. "Not this shit again!" he cried as he and Maggie vanished from the dream into the waking world. Chapter 21. Freddy Says Goodnight. Maggie flailed about as she came awake, nearly hitting Doc in the face. She jumped up, fist raised, as she, Doc, and Tracy scanned the office for any sign of Freddy. There was no sign of him. They were alone. "Where the hell is he?" Tracy asked. "I had him," Maggie said. "Maybe the trip killed him." Maggie looked down at her hands and shook her head in wonder. Everything was still in sharp focus, as if the world around her was more real than it had ever been before. She could see the pattern of fine lines left by the painter's brush as he painted the office walls. She could see the eyes of a tiny spider that watched them curiously from its perch on top of the bookcase across the room. "No," Maggie said. "I'm still seeing things like I did in my dream. He's still alive. It's not over yet." Tracy turned her head to stare at the office door and the dark basement beyond. "What do we do now?" Doc moved towards the door and pushed it open. Nothing moved in the passage beyond. "We find him, that's what," he said. "We finish this before he can hurt anyone else." He stepped over the threshold into the dimly lit corridor and walked toward the stairs leading up to the ground floor. The two women followed behind, and they all stopped halfway along the hall beside two closed doors. The one on the right opened onto the shelter's furnace and electrical room. The hiss of the old furnace sent chills along her spine. She reached out, touched the door, and shook her head. She couldn't quite explain it, but something inside was whispering that it wasn't right. She turned to the door on the left and put her hand on it. The door felt warm, where the other had been cold. Something breathed on the other side. She turned the knob and walked inside. The room was large and lit by incandescent bulbs housed in rusted fixtures that hung down from the roof at regular intervals. A metal cage took up one end of the room, while the rest was a maze of boxes piled neatly to the ceiling. Maggie walked to the cage and opened the gate. Inside were several tables piled high with the contraband that had been confiscated from the boys and girls of the shelter. "He's probably not even here," Doc said nervously. "I'll feel better after we check it out anyway," Maggie said, entering the cage and searching through the assorted weapons and tools. Doc and Tracy walked in and began to peruse the items as well. Doc picked up a machete and turned it back and forth in the warm yellow glow from the overhead bulb. "I can't believe the stuff we take off these kids." Maggie picked up a large butcher's knife, considered it, and put it back. "You should be grateful. We're going to need this shit to take Freddy out." "Hey," Tracy said, holding up a 6-inch long knife that was decorated with red and silver filigree along the blade. "Take a look at this." "That's too small," Maggie said. Tracy turned her eyes, growing wide at the sight of Maggie standing there with a wooden baseball bat studded with nails in one hand and a huge Bowie knife with brass knuckles on the handle in the other. Standing there like that, Tracy thought that Maggie looked like a badass warrior or a barbarian. "I guess so," Tracy said, eyeing her small knife before putting it back down. She picked up several ninja throwing stars and stuffed them in her pocket. Doc picked up a hammer, tested the weight. "You really think he's here?" "He's here," Maggie answered. "I can feel it." She stepped out of the cage and paused as if she were a bloodhound scenting a rabbit. She turned towards the stacks of boxes. It was there, like a flickering candle seen through fog. She crossed the room and stepped down the aisle between the boxes. Someone was groaning beyond the next turn. Maggie gripped the bat's handle tighter and walked around the bend. He was there, only much changed. Gone was the burned demon. In its place sat the blond man from her memories. He sat against a wooden crate, panting in pain and bleeding from the ragged wound she'd inflicted on his cheek. He touched the wound and held his hand out to show her the blood. "You're real here," she said.
"It's not my fault. You saw what they did to me when I was a kid. I loved you and your mother. I tried so hard to be good."
"I know, Daddy," Maggie said, holding his bright blue gaze with her own.
"I knew you would believe me,"
he said, slowly getting to his feet.
"You were my little girl. They should never have taken you away from me. I think I could have stopped if I still had you with me."
"I know, Daddy." He was 5 feet away from her, his bloody left hand held out for her to take, his right hidden behind him. Something wicked glinted in his eyes, giving them a momentary red and yellow hue. Maggie smiled in response. She was no fool. Freddy swung the bladed glove from behind his back, and Maggie met it with the baseball bat. Bones crunched and the glove came free. It skidded across the floor in a bloom of sparks. Maggie ran for it, picked it up, turned. Freddy was gone. "Maggie!" Doc shouted. "Where are you, girl?" "I'm here," she called back. "I found him, but he disappeared again. Be careful." Maggie weaved her way through the maze of crates and boxes, searching for any sign of renewed attack. She turned the corner and met Tracy and Doc in front of the cage. Both were covered in a thin sheen of sweat. They glanced around, seemingly on the verge of bolting. Their fear was a palpable thing. "Why don't I feel it like they do?" Maggie wondered. "I'm not frightened at all." Perhaps it was anger that drowned out her fear. Anger at the loss of a mother she'd never known she had. Anger for what was stolen from her. She pushed forward into the cage, staring into the corners and under the tables. There was nowhere for the monster to hide. Clang! The cage door swung shut and locked behind her. Maggie spun on her heels, but at the ready, and saw Freddy hanging from the ceiling like some demented ghoul. The illusion of normalcy was gone, and the charred nightmare was back. "Maggie!" Tracy screamed. She charged forward and tried the gate, found it shut fast. Doc joined her, and both kicked and beat on the gate, but it was no use. It was as if the dream demon held it closed by the working of his own will. "Where's the damn key?" Doc yelled. "I don't know," Tracy said, looking around the floor at her feet. "It was here a minute ago." Freddy released his grip on the roof and flipped over to land on his feet, lithe and quick as a cat. He held out his wounded right hand to her.
"Your friends can't help you now, Catherine. Give Daddy back his glove, Princess."
"Why?" she asked, backing away from him, the glove in one hand, the bat in the other. "You tried to kill me. Why should I listen to you now?" Freddy took a step closer.
"We are all we have left, just you and me. I'm your blood. Give me the glove and I'll take care of you. We can be together forever."
"You'll take care of me?" Maggie asked. "Like you took care of Mother?" Fire burned in Freddy's eyes. He ran forward impossibly fast, but Maggie was ready for him. She whipped the bat across his face, spilling fresh blood and knocking his hat off. "Like you took care of Carlos?" She hit him in the other side of his face, breaking his nose. "Like you took care of Spencer?" She jabbed him in the stomach with the end of the bat, and he bent over. "Like you took care of John and all the other Springwood kids?" She brought the bat down on the back of his head, burying the nails to the hilt in his skull. He reached for the bat, and she grabbed his hand with her right, intertwining her fingers in his. "Oh, Daddy," she crooned. "I remember when we used to hold hands like this when I was a child. I didn't like it then either." She flexed her hand, bending his fingers back until they broke, the fine bones jutting through his skin. He stumbled away, pulling away from her grasp. He yanked on the baseball bat, screaming as the nails came free. each dripping with viscid brain matter. He tossed the bat aside, and then bent his broken fingers back into place.
Fuck!
He shouted.
I forgot how much it hurts to be human.
Aw, Daddy, Maggie said. Look who's being a whiny little bitch. Freddy growled, all pretense of niceties gone.
I didn't need the glove to kill your bitch mother, and I don't need it to kill you now.
Maggie considered the knife at her belt and then looked at the bladed glove still clutched in her left hand. Freddy saw her and grinned.
Go ahead,
Freddy said.
Try it out. Put it on. It's in your blood.
Maggie did, sliding the glove onto her right hand. She felt the lethal weight of it. She flourished the blades, listening to the sound they made as they clashed against each other. How many innocent children heard that sound before they died? How many had felt the razor's biting edge? She looked back up at Freddy and felt true hatred fill her for the first time in her life.
Feels good, doesn't it?
He asked, beckoning her closer.
Come to Daddy. Let me show you how to use it.
She came at him, the glove held close to her side, like she'd seen him do. He reached for her and she jumped forward and jammed all 4 blades deep into his stomach. He wrapped his arms around her, trying to fight her off, but his strength seemed to be fading, and she stayed close. She jammed the glove into him again and again, twisting and twiddling her finger blades in his rotten guts. Freddy held his head back and screamed.
Ah!
Maggie! She glanced towards the gate and saw Tracy with the pipe bomb Orderly Kelly had taken from Spencer just days ago, clutched in her hand. She tossed it to Maggie, who caught it with her left hand, pressed a switch on the side, and shoved it into Freddy's open abdomen. Happy Father's Day! Maggie shouted, giving him a kick in the balls and then running for the gate. She hit it, and it gave under her hands. Whatever power Freddy had over it diminished and broken. She took Tracy and Doc by the arm and rushed them out of the room, along the hallway, and up the stairs. In the basement, Freddy dug into his torn abdomen, not caring if he caused more pain, more injury. He felt the pipe, tried to grab it, but it was slick with blood, and he lost his grip. The pipe began to buzz inside him as the trigger prepared to go off. Freddy pulled his hand out and sat back against the wall, staring off into space. It had been a good run, and he'd gotten away with it for a long time. How much longer would he have gone on if not for those meddling kids? The buzzing became a thrum that shook his very bones. A second later, the bomb ignited, blowing the dream demon to shreds. Maggie felt the building tremble as the explosion rocked the whole structure. She skidded to a stop and burst into raucous laughter beside Doc and Tracy, who joined in, each hugging the others. Suddenly, the world shifted from high definition to a weird mix of red and blue, and Maggie realized the 3D glasses she'd used to see past Freddy's illusions had reappeared on her face. She reached up, pulled them off, and handed them back to Doc, who folded them and stowed them in his shirt pocket. What the hell is going on? They turned to see Kelly and several teenagers running towards them up the hall. Doc pointed to the basement door and shrugged. I'm not sure. It sounded like the basement boiler blew. You better go check it out. Kelly puffed his chest out. An important man on important business. He ran by with the curious kids in tow. Maggie, Doc, and Tracy watched them until they were out of sight, and then turned once again to each other. Maggie grinned. Freddy's dead, she said. Outside, the chalk image of the killer that had appeared after Maggie and Tracy's return from Springwood began to fade away into nothingness. The final nightmare was finally over. Epilogue. Another time and place. The entity was nameless and ageless. had existed in the black void between the stars for as long as it could remember. It thought of itself as the one who watches and laughs. Its favorite things to watch were the destruction of the innocent and the ones who loved them. It had watched the ancient Sumerians as they sacrificed their own children to their gods. It laughed as it watched innocent women burned at the stake or boiled in oil during the Salem witch trials. Oh, how it had enjoyed the Holocaust. Sometimes it liked to do more than watch. Sometimes its attention would be caught by a story or piece of art so gruesome and evil that it had the power to capture the entity's essence. When this happened, it would take the form of the interesting thing and run around in its skin for a time. It was happening again. The entity stared from its place between the worlds at the thin man slumped over his writing desk. The man's hair and beard were gray, and there were dark circles under his closed eyes. His name was Wes, and he was a teller of tales. Many of his stories were mean, but one in particular was calling out to it, telling it that it had the power to capture its black soul. The entity looked at the computer screen by the man's head and saw a small cursor blinking in a steady cadence on a field of white. It was blank, empty, like the entity itself, and full of potential. All the storyteller needed was a little push. It reached out and touched the man's head with its invisible fingers, disturbing his pleasant dreams. The man groaned as the bit of mental grit became a wicked pearl inside his mind. He came awake with a start and looked around in fear as if expecting a visitor. "Freddy?" he called, and then he grimaced, embarrassed that he'd called out to a figment of his imagination. Of course, Freddy wasn't there. He was a character Wes had created years ago. Still, there was something to the dream he'd awakened from. A light bulb flashed on in his head, and his grimace turned to a grin. He'd been struggling to come up with the beginning of a new script, and he thought he'd just caught it out of thin air. The entity felt excitement coursing through it as the man put his fingers on the computer keyboard and typed 4 words. Then the man sat back and read the screen. "Wes Craven's New Nightmare," he said. "It's not Mozart, but it still sings just the same." "Yes," thought the entity with a wicked laugh. Already it could feel the change beginning. The formless took on form. It glanced down at its burned and scarred body, at the glove with its 4 razor-sharp blades, and felt joy.
Yes, it thought, it really does sing.
Okay, Slashaholics, this has been Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. A Nightmare on Elm Street 6, the fan novelization by Jeremy Terry. I enjoyed this entire book, not just the stuff that we expected from the movie in novelization form, but all the little things, creative liberties, and extra inner thoughts, extra dialogue, added scenes that were taken from the movie, alternate scenes. All of that just was perfect in this novelization. Had a blast reading it. And it's so awesome to have every Freddy movie covered now. But, a little surprise for all of you that might not know this, Jeremy Terry is going to be working on fan novelizations of A Nightmare on Elm Street 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the future. You might be asking yourself, you might be asking me, but Slasher, we already have those books. Well, as you all know, the novelizations for those Freddy movies are very short and just carbon copies of the movie. There's no flair to them. There's no
creative liberties.
Freddy doesn't get to
have a lot of fun.
Except for maybe the third one. But Jeremy is going to work on those in the future. Very exciting for that to come. And I look forward to adding those to the channel as alternate novelizations for all you Freddy fans. But back to this book. Loved it. I was a little sad that I didn't get to say,
Now you're playing with power.
but yeah, if you want to go back and hear what I thought of the prologue through chapter 19, you can do that in the individual chapters. But I'm mostly going to talk about the ending here. Really enjoyed the stuff in Freddy's head. That was awesome. You know, we got a peek into the Dream Demons a little more than the movies gave us. You know, what Catherine thought of everything. And, you know, their showdown in the basement was a lot of fun. And her entry into, like, the dream world, into Freddy's head, the way it was explained, and Freddy feeling the pain and everything, felt more brutal and stuff than the movie did. And the use of the 3D glasses, also great. I just wish that at some point, and maybe I'll do it in a Freddy book in the future, that when Freddy's brought from the dream world, as soon as he comes out, he's just screaming in agony and pain because he's human again and he's burned from head to toe. Okay, I'm kidding a little bit there. That would kind of just ruin the story. But think about it for a second. He should be screaming, right? Unless all of his nerves are killed. That's a possibility, I reckon. But also, in the movie Freddy's Dead, the glasses are supposed to help her see through the illusions. And yet, she still sees him as human Freddy, even because the glasses are still working until he's dead. But then again, she knew he was full of shit, but I don't think that's the same as the glasses doing their job. But it's okay. That's nothing to really, harp on. The movie was a lot of fun. Even if it is one of the worst Freddy movies, it's still a fun movie. I still like it. But I absolutely loved the novelization. And I'm so glad that Jeremy took the time to write it for all of us. And that epilogue, I did not see that coming. Great epilogue, Jeremy. I think all the slashaholics are going to agree. Throwing in the stuff about the entity, setting up New Nightmare, that was awesome. And I would love to see your take on New Nightmare, honestly. You know, like your version of New Nightmare, what you would do with it. Maybe not put yourself into the book like the author of New Nightmare, the novelization did, David. But, you know, kind of get us into the entity more and find out who was helping the entity. Maybe the babysitter was possessed for a while. You know, somebody had to be sending those letters in the mail and making those phone calls and stuff, you know. I seriously doubt the entity was going to the post office and mailing these letters and, you know, getting a cell phone at the time, you know, big old Zach Morris cell phone, and making phone calls to Nancy. Or, I'm sorry.
Yeah, to Nancy.
To Heather. But yeah, that epilogue was awesome. 10 out of 10. Great job, Jeremy. Really loved this book, and the epilogue was chef's kiss. Thank you so much for that. Alright, everybody, I would love to hear from you in the comments section, and Jeremy would too. What did you think of these final chapters, and what did you think of Freddy's Dead, the Final Nightmare, the fan novelization by Jeremy Terry? Did you enjoy it as much as me? What did you like about it? What were the creative liberties he took that you enjoyed the most? Stuff like that. Did you enjoy the epilogue? We'd love to hear from you. Please take the time to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Click the like button, drop a comment below, and if you really want to go the extra mile, spread the word, and go even further than that. You can become a Patreon member, a channel member. That can really help keep the channel going and growing for years to come. You can pick up one of my books, or one of Jeremy's, or James Acosta's on Amazon. All that information is always in the pinned comment and description below these narrations. And if you want to do like a one-time tip to the channel, you can do through PayPal, Cash App, or a super thanks comment below on any video on the channel. You can even get a cameo video, on Cameo if you want me to do a happy birthday, an anniversary thing, anything you want. I'll make you a fun video. I can do it as me, as Freddy, Chucky, whatever you want. It can be a lot of fun. All the information for any of that is in the pinned comment description. I had a blast. I hope you did too. Until next time, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying thanks for listening. Be excellent to each other. Remember, the sun never sets on those who ride into it. Stay sane inside insanity out there, folks.
Pleasant dreams.
And don't worry, one way or the other,
Freddy will be back.
See you next.
Time to wake up, the librarian is back. The librarian is back. The librarian is back in the slasher groove. It's time to wake up, it's time to wake up. No more distractions, no more co-host review shows. Just narrating slasher books for slashaholics. I'm done with those damn review shows. Done with being someone's co-host. I'm just narrating slasher books for the slashaholics. I'm done with those damn review shows. Done with being someone's co-host. I'm just narrating slasher books for the slashaholics. And when Jason walks in with his machete, or when you cross paths with Myers, or you dream of Freddy, whatever the tale, I'm gonna read it for you. Cause I'm the 80s fucking slasher librarian Josh LaRue. Whatever I read, whatever you hear, there's one thing I'll promise year after year. You're gonna get the best of my best, this I promise you. Cause I'm back in that fucking bloody slasher groove. Because the librarian is back in the slasher groove. The librarian is back in that slasher groove. That's a promise from Josh LaRue. Slasher books both old and new, written by me and written by you. Yup, now I'm back, I'm back. No more distractions, no more co-host review show. Librarian is back in that slasher groove. Just narrating slasher books for slashaholics. The librarian is back. I even wrote my own take on Jason and Freddy. Started with quarantine and then I was ready. So I sent Krueger to space in celestial slumber. Then Jason went primal and the rafters had his number. My audiobooks have crossed 75. Now let's hit 100 and have a fucking good time. The librarian is back in the slasher groove. The librarian is back in that slasher groove. Just narrating slasher books for slashaholics. The librarian is back. Even wrote my own take on Jason and Freddy. Started with quarantine and then I was ready. So I sent Krueger to space in celestial slumber. Then Jason went primal and the raptors had his number. My audiobooks have crossed 75. Now let's hit 100 and have a fucking good time. The librarian is back in the slasher groove. Just narrating slasher books for slashaholics. The librarian is back. The librarian is back in the slasher groove. It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up. No more distractions. My own take on Jason and Freddy. Started with quarantine and then I was ready. So I sent Krueger to space in celestial slumber. Then Jason went primal and the rafters had his number. My audiobooks have crossed 75. Now let's hit 100 and have a fucking good time. The librarian is back in the slasher groove. Just narrating slasher books for slasher both old and new. Written by me and written by you. Now I'm back, no more distractions. No more distractions. No more distractions. No more co-host review shows.